Welcome, everyone, to the Ghost Helpers podcast. I'm your host, Tina Erwin. And on this podcast, we discuss all kinds of things that are paranormal. But for a lot of us, this is our normal. All kinds of topics are discussed, and we have a really, really good time. And you can pick this show up on the Ghost Helpers app. Today, I'd like to welcome everyone to get to know my special guest, Jeanette Amen, and she's in La Jolla, California. Well, I'm way up here in the cold of Washington State, even though it's the middle of July. Welcome, Jeanette, and tell everyone a little bit. Well, before we get into a little bit about you, let me start out by saying how we met each other. Jeanette is a real estate agent in La Jolla and a variety of places. And in 2007, we thought we were going to sell our San Diego home. And she was a cold call. I was a cold call for her. And I said yes. And we sat down and she tried to sell our house. And finally, she did the most honest thing a real estate agent could ever do. She said, I don't think you're supposed to move. I mean, can you imagine that? I don't think you're supposed to move. So we stayed and we didn't actually move till 2020, in the COVID craziness. So Jeanette, I want to thank you for enabling us to stay in San Diego a little bit longer, actually a lot longer, but along the way, we developed this really amazing friendship. So Jeanette, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So,
Well, about your experiences as an agent and a little about how you sell and what you do.
Of course. First of all, I was so grateful to meet you. And yes, you were a cold call, sort of an interesting cold call. I've been selling real estate for since 1987, and I've sold over 500 homes all up and down San Diego County. My office is in La Jolla, but we work along the coast and from San Ysidro to Oceanside into La Mesa and beyond. So when I called you, it was because you had your house on the market with an agent and it didn't sell. And I specialized in what we call expired listings, which were homes that listed and didn't sell for one reason or another. And then people had a listing on the multiple listing service that disappeared. So I would call people to see if they were interviewing for an agent, and that's how we met. And if you recall, I came over to your home, and when I walked in, I was totally unaware of all of the things you do and this whole other, what I call another world that opened up to me once I met you. But I still knew when I walked in your home that something didn't feel right. It was like there was no life in there. And you had told me you had your home staged for sale. And what I realized is that everything that had the feeling of warmth in it was not there. So when a buyer walked in, many buyers buy because the house feels good. It didn't feel like anything. It just felt like it was a house, but it didn't feel like a home. And I don't know if we talked about that a lot when we first met, but that was my first impression when we met.
You were absolutely right. And it was cold. I mean, we can just say that word out loud, that the house felt cold to me, in addition to people who walked in, because we had taken down all of the art because the previous agent said, oh my gosh, that will be too intimidating if you have walls of art. So we did that, and that was the wrong move to take. And that was the first thing you noticed, which told me immediately that you were very sensitive as a person as well as a real estate agent, because if you're feeling that, you knew immediately that's what a buyer was going to feel, because this whole podcast is about what you're feeling.
Well, and some people, buy a home because they feel good in it. Some people buy a home because of the way it looks visually. So I think if you don't have all of that combined, then it's very difficult to sell a house. So and Tina, we know we're so grateful your home did not sell. Um, and so we were, because then we got to have a relationship for a number of years, and you taught me more than I could ever imagine. And, I'll never forget, we had a group of realtors from out of town who were here for a seminar, and they were from all over the United States and Canada. And a number of them came over to my house, and you did a little class about ghosts and things going on in houses, and people were astonished because they realized they have all of these properties they list, and some things don't sell, and you don't have any understanding what's going on. It's priced right, there's plenty of buyers, and for one reason or another, something's not working. And you helped so many of those agents with your seminar that you gave. And I got a lot of accolades from people after that, and thanking me and you for doing that seminar. Yeah, that was fun.
That was a fun night because I wore a giant witch's hat and said, "This is what people think of psychics." And then I took the hat off and talked about the reality is you don't have to, wear the garb of a psychic to feel there's something wrong here or this isn't right. And frankly, real estate is all about how a location feels. I mean, that's really the bottom line. And if it feels a whole lot creepy, then you got to do something about it.
Well, yes. For example, you have helped me a number of times with clients, and I know you'll remember, the craziest one to me was our client that had a multimillion-dollar house that had been for sale with, I think, 3 or 4 previous realtors over a period of 2 years. And it was the most expensive house in the neighborhood. Nothing had sold at the price that these people wanted since the 2006 mortgage meltdown. And then sadly, the husband passed away in the middle of our listing. And after that, a real estate agent came through, and when we called him to ask him if his clients were interested in the house, he said he was very embarrassed. And he said, "I have this really strange thing to tell you, and I can't quite understand it." He hardly could get the words out. But he said, "My client said there's a ghost in the house." And I said, "Oh, well, that's no problem. We can fix that. Tell them we'll fix it and bring them back." There was dead silence on the end of the phone. He was speechless.
I love it.
Yeah, he was speechless. I'll never forget that. And I'm not sure what he said after that, but we called you and you talked to the client. I don't know if you want to tell a little bit about that situation.
Well, I think this was the one where, because to clear the house, we really needed the client's permission because we're always making sure that we are courteous to whoever owns the house and ask permission. And then if you really want to sell this property, we need to do this. And if I've done so many houses, but if this is the one where the family knew that the dad was there, the husband was there.
She didn't believe in any of it. She talked to you and you explained it to her, and I think she agreed to do it, and but I don't think she got it until her son had a dream about his dad the night that you moved him on. So did you know about that?
I didn't remember that part. I mean, I'm still doing this. So it's, I've just done this thousands and thousands of times. So unfortunately, I just don't have
You don't remember all of it. Well,
all of it, but I do know that I talked to her and tried to help her understand.
Yeah, you did. And she sort of got it. You moved her husband on. And the next morning, her son called her and told her that he had a dream about his dad on one side of a fence telling him he had to go. And he told his mom that, and she was floored. And all of a sudden, she really, she kind of woke up to what you had said. In the long story short, right after that, we called someone that had seen the house previously. They made an offer on the property, and we sold that house for double, almost more than double what any house had sold for in that neighborhood in the last 7 or 8 years. So, they had been trying to sell for over 2 years, and then this happens, and then the house sells. I just feel like there was some kind of divine intervention to help that lady move out of her house when she wanted to. So,
I think that's a really good observation, because it may be that he wanted to stay in the house until he died. And it's nothing, there's no detriment to the other agents who very probably gave it their all. But the synchronicity of he died at that moment in time and still didn't want to let go. We've seen that many times. Someone loves their home, they can't let go of it. And in this case, by enabling him to feel, by crossing him over and enabling him to feel the beautiful light of the divine, and when that enabled him to let go. In the meantime, once someone's crossed over, they can visit a loved one in the dream state, but only a couple of times. They don't get to do that a lot. And it helped the son to feel at peace. And he probably, the dad who died, probably believed that his son would tell his wife that he had to go now and it was all right. And that synchronicity of our conversations, with her and crossing him over and the son, it unfortunately, it can freak people out. But at some point, they kind of have to get over it and move forward, because the end result was something that she really wanted to have done. And her grief and the family's grief would be less, because they're not feeling him wanting to hold on. And when he said, I have to go now, it was like he was finally at peace. So I think that's a great story.
well, and it really helped the son be at peace. And I know it helped his mom. So she was happy to move. She was very happy to move. And it just worked out for everybody. So, I've just been so grateful over the years for your help. Really grateful.
Well, thank you. And the opportunity. Now, you've had situations with ghosts where you didn't need me. You could cross them over yourselves. You have a couple of those?
Well, okay. So my business partner and I went to list a house. We went to an appointment for a person who was a retired military guy. And he was probably in his 70s, maybe 80s. And his wife had passed, and he'd been rambling around this house for a couple of years. All her stuff was still in the house. He just couldn't let go of anything. His friends had been trying to get him to make a move to a retirement home or somewhere where he'd have friends around. And I guess he finally decided to do it. So we were over at the house, and he's showing us the house. And he didn't go in one room when we walked in. And my business partner goes, I smell perfume. And I said, I couldn't smell it, but she could smell it. She goes, oh my gosh, it's so strong. So we, went into the room and looked around, so we're viewing the house to decide how to price it. Then when we came out, we asked him about it, and he said, well, that was where my wife's bathroom was. She used that bathroom, and all her office and everything was in there. So we listed the house. It wasn't selling. We came and talked to him about, and regardless of whether it was selling or not, we still were trying to figure out how to approach this man and ask him about whether we could move the wife on, because we figured that was why we smelled perfume, or my business partner smelled perfume in there. And, it's difficult to approach people when you have no idea of what their concept of this kind of thing is. So we said, is there a chance your wife is still in the house? And he said, my wife's not in the house, and we said, well, it feels like there's some kind of energy in the house. Would it be okay if we cleared any energy, that shouldn't be here out of your house and moved anything on? And he said, go ahead, clear out any spirits. But I don't believe in any of this stuff. So, of course, we moved the wife on, and we just used the crossing over prayer. And I'm sure the wife moved on because the house sold in the next week and he was moving, but he still never believed in any of that stuff. But it was okay for us to move on any spirits. He just didn't believe in it. So, what it told me was that he really knew something was there, but he just couldn't accept talking about it.
Well, for some reason, it's alarming and scary for people, and that's something we have to respect the other person's frame of reference and their experience. But on another level, people know it's probably why he couldn't let go of things, because they were her things, and they acquired them together, and she probably wouldn't be happy if he let them go. And her death didn't change her presence and the impact her presence was still having on him. And that makes a difference. And the whole point of the crossing over prayer was so that anyone, and frankly, especially a real estate agent, can do what they need to do and feel empowered. That's a really great story for that. And I think before I wrote the crossing over prayer, you had a situation, I think it was like December 28th with a closing. Do you remember that one? And your house had fallen out. There was one problem after the other going to closing. And you said, if we don't get this closed by December 31st, something was going to happen and it wasn't going to be good.
That was a client, their house had fell out of escrow multiple times. Then we listed it. And then I think it fell out of escrow once. We put it back under contract, and the VA loan that the buyer was trying to do was declined. And it just didn't make sense that all this was happening. So we asked the owner if her sister was still in the house, because it was the sister's house and her sister who lived out of town was selling it. She said, "Oh, I know she's in there." We said, well, maybe she's doesn't want her house to sell. And she said, well, yeah, I know that's exactly what's going on. So this is before I knew about the crossing over prayer. And we referred her to you the next day, and that week. And she talked to you, and I'm not sure what happened on your end with her, but you did move the sister on. And the crazy thing is that the VA reversed their decision. That doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't happen.
The house closed the next day. Now, there are a number of steps that normally are taken between getting a loan approved and then having it funded and having the buyer put the money in and all. Normally that takes a few days. It closed the very next day. So it's like the whole universe shifted itself differently and everything happened, and then we were finished. Yeah.
And that benefited every single person involved in the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
It was a benefit to all concerned, which just goes to show you, not that you needed convincing, but speaking metaphorically, that when you address this energy, the energy of a person who has physically died, but their soul is still it's basically haunting the house or pacing the house or inhabiting the house. This dark, sooty, almost smoky energy, which most of the time you're not going to see, has a tendency to block the ambitions or the hopes or the desires of all of the parties involved, from the brokers to the agents to the sellers to the banking people. It's as if they're fogged. And if the person is very, very strong-willed or doesn't want that house to sell, or they're angry that they died, or they were really controlling, then that sooty energy is actually magnified. When the person is crossed over and you kind of clear it a little bit, it's as if people wake up and go, oh, okay, well, we can do this. It's like they come out of this sleep and you didn't even have to kiss a handsome prince to get it. That makes a remarkable difference. And I feel like this podcast is very important for anyone who thinks that their house is haunted. There was a house in Colorado. I don't know where this was, but I saw this on it. It was like a 60 Minutes show. And in several states, you have to indicate, and you can verify this, that if someone passed away in the house, sometimes some states it's if there's ever been somebody pass away. In other states, it's within 5 years. You have to disclose it on all the disclosures by the sellers. Well, a serial killer had owned that house and murdered 6 people in that house, one victim after the other. And this was never disclosed to the buyers. And apparently when they went through, they didn't sense that there was a problem. But after they moved in, it was truly a very hellish type of house, and they didn't know what to do. And I was doing a lot of work for the Edgar Cayce Center in Virginia Beach at the time, and I volunteered to clear the house, and she tried to contact the producers of 60 Minutes, but we weren't able to get anywhere. And I really wanted to help those people just as a public service, because I think eventually the murderer died in the house. And then the couple who bought the house, not knowing any of this, discovered all this blood underneath the wall-to-wall carpet, because they had carpeted over the wood floors where the murders took place. So for the family, they were beside themselves. It was the biggest mess. So these things have a huge difference. They make a huge, huge difference. So I think you had a couple other cases, didn't you?
Well, and yes, and just what you were talking about reminds me that one of the things you taught us is how to protect ourselves when we go to a house, because we don't know what, we go to a house that someone wants to sell. We don't know the reason someone's selling or what's going on with the house. We get there and we walk through the house so they can show us their house and find out what we can sell it for. And, we don't know what we're walking into. And I'm not always, I'm sort of sensitive to things, but not like, I don't see things like some people do, or, I can't sense things at all like you do. So, but it's been very helpful for me to have ways to protect myself when I go into houses, because I just don't know what I'm going to find. And I don't want to walk out and start dragging anything around with me all over town either.
Or bring it home.
And speaking of home, you'll probably recall this, but one day we had a man on our street, on our block, and he passed. And my husband one day said, this is like the street of widows, because we'd have 3 men pass on our street in a period of something like 5 years. And it just was off the top of his head. And when I heard that, I just panicked. So I called you and I said, something's going on in our neighborhood. And so you took a look, and
but I'm going to interrupt you here to add to that. your husband was already starting to feel ill. Do you remember that part?
No.
He was. And, he had mentioned it, and then he started to exhibit either some of the symptoms that the other men had exhibited before they passed away. And it really heightened your sense of, oh, we should look into this. Because you were really worried about him. I mean,
Yeah.
when you love your husband as much as I know you love your husband, you really want to make sure that nothing happens to them to the best of your ability. And I absolutely respected and admired that. So go ahead.
Well, so so you checked things out and you found that there was some group of ladies who had decided, who, I don't know what they were doing, but they were doing something on the top of the hill before any of these homes were built. And they were having some kind of seance or something. And I don't recall exactly what it was.
It was so astounding. I eventually want to make some sort of a book out of this one because it was an astounding story. And I think there were 5 women, and they were women from the 50s, and they were bored. And there weren't that many people in La Jolla in the 50s. I mean, it was a small town, really small little enclave and pretty little place. And not that it's gigantic now, but it's much more built up. And they didn't really like men. And they figured out how to do tarot cards, which again, we talk about in the book, Psychic Children, Psychic People. They were doing the cards and they were contacting the other side and holding these seances. And they started to target various wealthy men. And the men would die and they'd leave their widows, the property and all this money. And they thought this was great sport because it didn't occur to them that any of these women actually loved their husbands, which was kind of deeply, deeply disturbing. And they moved among the hills in La Jolla. Well, once some of these areas began to be built up, because it's like, this wasn't always ongoing. It appeared to you that it's like, is this another person? This is 3 in a, kind of like 3 in a row. These are perfectly healthy guys, and now they're gone. Doesn't this seem odd? They were active and athletic and didn't appear to be their time. And these were very, very angry, controlling women. And they informed me they had no intention of leaving, which I've heard before. It's like, we can stay as long as we want. It's like, no, not really. When you are impacting the living and you are committing crimes, even as a ghost, you are doing these terrible black magic rituals that impact and harm the living. That is incurring horrific karma. And I have it's like, my free will trumps yours because you're impacting the living. So I brought in a team of spiritual police and some angels, and I crossed these kind of witchy women over. And they go to the location in the heaven world commensurate with the karma they have incurred in mortal life and as a ghost. And then after that, it's like, your husband began to feel better, and it's like you could feel a difference. Do you remember that part?
Well, I don't recall that, but I do know that we have not had anyone else on our street pass since then. Everybody still has their husbands.
Yeah.
So
It's 10 years.
Oh yeah, it's been a long time. Long
Yeah.
time.
And yes, everyone is going to have a date with death, but you don't need somebody to artificially manipulate it and create grief and heartache for all these people, because people don't live or have these experiences in a vacuum. It affects a lot of individuals, and look how it affected you. And fortunately, you didn't want to put up with that. So my impression was these women were also very jealous of the women who had good husbands. That was another element. If they thought if they thought the marriage was good, then they could meddle and manipulate and hurt.
That's so sad,
It's very, very sad, but by crossing them over, it enabled the higher realms to now actually work with these women. And maybe in the next life they won't do these terrible things. That's way beyond my pay grade, thank goodness. But it's a very interesting observation.
Well, the one situation I remember where I was sad we couldn't do anything about it. We had a house. We had a client who. Well, let me start at the beginning. There's a house in La Jolla where an owner went bankrupt. Then the next owner went bankrupt. Then the bank owned the house, and they were working on the house. And I went down there one day to talk to them about it, and they ended up hiring us to rent the house. So we did, and after we rented the house, the dishwasher leaked, and then the bathroom sink leaked, and then there was mold in the house, and then that had to be remediated. I mean, it was just one thing after another. And I just started thinking there's something going on with this house. This just isn't normal. So when I asked the workers, I said, is there a ghost in this house? Do you notice anything? Or sometimes I say like a presence because people get freaked out if I say the word ghost.
Yeah, I get it.
And the workers, it's like, oh yeah, there's a ghost in this house. We don't go in that room, and they move stuff around with our construction things and other things. Like, oh God. So anyway, when the tenants moved out a number of years later, they had actually trashed the house also. And the lender never believed us. We tried to say, can we clear the house? There's something going on there. They're just right over their heads. So they actually ended up listing it for sale with another agent, and it did sell eventually. I don't know what state the house is in now. It's been remodeled by whoever owns it now, but I was just sad that we were never able to have the opportunity to move whoever on was at the house. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do if you can't get permission and someone doesn't understand. So
that's true. And you have to respect whoever is in charge. You have to respect their wishes, and they don't want to have their higher ups think that they're crazy, and they're not willing to take the risk, which is kind of unfortunate. But do you remember the house where you were asked to bid on the house and you were very unnerved because it was next door?
Yeah.
You want to tell that story?
Yeah, next door to the one in, yeah.
You can not necessarily say the name of what that situation is if it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah, I probably won't. And we did not get the listing, unfortunately, but I'll tell you, you gave me about 18 ways to protect myself going in there. And the owner had definitely been affected by what happened across the street. And, there were multiple deaths across the street in one time. And it was a horrible, horrible national news situation. But the lady across the street was she wanted to sell her house, and it was years before people kind of forgot about what happened across the street, and she was able to think about moving. But she anyone who could stay in a house that long after something like that happened across the street, she just wasn't motivated enough to to even look at what could be affecting her property. So we didn't end up listing the house. But I was very nervous going there.
Well, I remember that phone call, and you also asked her if you could clear it if you got the listing. Her house, not the house across the
Right,
street.
right.
And she didn't buy into any of it.
No, no. So, sometimes things happen for a reason. And, if we can approach people, and it's just funny because some people just, oh yeah, I know that. And other people, maybe in the back of their head, they're thinking about something, but they don't want to um, say anything because it's too strange for them. It's not in their like realm of normal enough. So,
I understand that. And it makes it very, very difficult. The house that we had in Charleston, which I have detailed in, it's the first story in Ghost Stories from the Ghost Point of View. It the house was 18 months old. So I knew virtually everything in Charleston was haunted, but I thought a new house. I mean, this was in 1979. What did I know in 1979? New house, you know, and when we walked through the house, this is what was so interesting to me. All the other places that we went in, I could feel, oh my gosh, this is so haunted. But I didn't feel it when we walked through that house. Maybe because I don't know. But after we moved in, it was so haunted. It was epically, the pounding on the walls and hearing footsteps all over the place and things disappearing and just cars not working and pounding above your head in bed. And it was horrendous. And I didn't know how you removed a ghost from a house. And so my sister was going to college and staying with us in that house. She contacted the nearest real estate agency and talked to several of the agents and the broker. And they all started laughing and they said, "Oh, we know that the Archdale subdivision is haunted. Everybody knows that. It was part of the Archdale plantation that goes back to the 1600s." Like, duh. Everybody knows that. It's like, okay.
everybody except me.
I just came from Italy, so I'm not the person who we were stationed in Italy, we moved to Charleston, and I honestly kind of felt like we'd moved from the Renaissance to the swamp, and it was a very wrong impression because Charleston was truly a beautiful place to live, and I grew to have a deep and abiding affection for the city because it is a truly charming place. But it was really hot that summer, and the house was so profoundly haunted. And the ghost that was in that house actually got in bed with me and held my hand. He didn't do anything else bad, but he held my hand and I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was in complete paralysis. So when people tell me that they have these bizarre experiences with a ghost, been there, done that, I believe you. You don't have to convince me. At the end of the day, he was instrumental, this particular ghost. And if somebody's a male or a female ghost in a house, you can feel a male presence or female presence or child. And my neighbor, oh my gosh, she talked about all the presence she could feel. Then I found out that neighbors all over the neighborhood were feeling the same presence. So I didn't know how to cross a ghost over. And because of that experience, karma never wastes energy. It set me out on this quest to learn how to help the dead. And people talk about just wanting to get rid of them, but you don't want to get rid of them. They're not like compost. You just, put it out by the side of the street. These are souls. Maybe they're horrible, or maybe they're a child that doesn't know what to do. And, real estate agents are doing quite a service when they cross over the dead, not just for their seller or buyer, but just in general. It's a karmic spiritual service, and it's important. And I want to reiterate again that in this I have my little handy book here, the Psychic Children, Psychic People book, There are practices in chapters 39 through 41 for anyone, but especially a real estate agent, to use to protect themselves in a dicey situation. Everything from calling in spiritual police to putting yourself in a triangle of force, or if you're dealing with a really toxic client, you can put yourself in a mirrored cylinder so that their energy goes back to them. And those things can begin to help. The friend who wrote the foreword in part 2 of this book lives a mile from Folsom Prison in Folsom, California. So she had a lot of dead criminals who were coming to her house. And in addition to immigrants who had come across the country for the gold rush in that area, and some of them were children. So she had a psychic sense, so they're crossing people over constantly. And they're empowered now, and she didn't want to have to sell her house. Now she knows how to protect herself. And then eventually, if she chooses to move, she will have done a great service in clearing her own house, which I've also helped her with because it's a mile from a prison. But I recently had a weird situation where I had to go to a dentist, and I couldn't even stay in the dentist's office for 5 minutes because his office was across the street from a cemetery attached to a church, or a graveyard attached to a church. So I cleared that, but I had to get the dentist's permission, and he completely freaked him out. But I cleared it enough. I was the very first client on a Monday morning for him to do what he needed to do. And I could feel the difference having had the whole office cleared in the predecessor energy. And that really brings us to another element, which is the predecessor energy of every single location. And I know that when you walk into someone's home for the first time, you're conscious of everything from the clutter to how it smells. And some people use a lot of curry or a lot of spice of some kind. Apples and cinnamon is one thing, but when the walls are embedded with certain aromas, it knocks you down. But they can't smell it anymore. It's just part of their norm. So, have you had some of that predecessor energy hit you sometimes when you go in homes?
I don't feel things as much, I think, as my business partner did. But what I do notice is when things just don't seem right. So I still protect myself.
Mm-hmm.
It can be like the situation, or the fact that the home's been on the market with 3 agents before, or and it's not selling, or just when I look at the whole situation, if something seems not right, that's more of a clue to me than and sometimes I can feel the energy in the atmosphere, but I can't feel like if there's a presence, I guess. So yes, I work hard to remember to protect myself, and I don't always remember to do it when I go into a house. It's not just in real estate. You go to a friend's house, anyone's house. When we go, we don't know what's going to be there.
That's very true.
So it can be anywhere. It can be anywhere. And there was something when you mentioned the dentist, I recalled a story when you had a pet that you sadly had. It was an older pet, and I think you went to the was it you, I think, and you went into the
Vet's office.
the vet's office, and I think you said you looked up and there were 100 animals staring at you, 100 pets staring at you from the corner. Was that you, or was that another friend?
Um, Well, I've helped a lot of people with the death of their pet at a vet where you have to put the animal to sleep, plus my own. And a lot of times the animal doesn't know what to do. So it could have been me.
Okay, well, it might have been you. It might have been my former physical therapist. Um, all I remember is that they went and there were all these pets staring at her out of the corner of the office. So they used the moving on, the prayer,
For animals.
and yeah, and moved them all on. Um, but it just, I mean, it was just, I can't imagine like walking into an office and having 100 pets looking at you.
Exactly. Well,
So,
an animal shelter. The animals when they go into an animal shelter, the predecessor energy from all the previous animals that have been there would be tremendous, and all the emotion that they would experience. Sometimes really small dogs just shake endlessly, or the big dogs howl because they don't understand why they're there. And that is overwhelming for animals, and animals can see ghosts. So it's truly a challenge. It's just truly a challenge on so many levels to understand the energies of people who have been there before, lived and died, and people who buy houses that were from the 30s or the 40s. I mean, think of all the people who live there, or imagine the predecessor energy in all of the apartments, or all the dorms on a college campus. I mean, think about why you would want to clear that. I don't think we have enough of an appreciation for the energy of people who have lived there before. I'm really fortunate because the house we're in, the builder built it for himself, and he built it in 2017 and moved in 2020. So he was barely in it 3 years, and there'd been nobody had ever lived on this land before that time, which is highly unusual, which is actually the case in the San Diego house. We were the second owners or second people who lived on the property. Although in La Mesa, there had been Native Americans, and there had been Native Americans around that in Lake Helix because there was a water source, there was a spring there. So, having cleared my own house several times, more like thousands of times, you get to see some of the things that have come before. But if nobody's ever lived in a location before, you have the animals that have passed through. But if there were no wars, there were no skirmishes, there were no fires, you have pretty clean energy. And if you keep it really clean, you will make sure that animals and insects and pollinators and every kind of creature can feel really good, and you can create a power spot on that property which will positively affect everything in a geographic area. So it can be pretty amazing when you think about all the kind of cool things that you can do once you understand it and you're not afraid of it, and now you have some tools. And that's really what the whole podcast is about, is understanding that yes, this happened, here's the tool, you use the tool, and this is the result. And although
and
that
that's
sounds straightforward,
Yeah,
can be.
and that's what, the all the real estate agents that when you hold that little class were very grateful for was having the tools. And one of the things I remember you mentioning was about looking at the plants, because if the plants in an area were like, I can't remember the one that you said is really bad, but if there are really like stickery, unfriendly plants in an area, it just, the energy is not great there.
That's true. And the Native Americans would understand that there are energy lines in the earth without going into, a lot of detail. And they would look at, and they could tell that an energy line was going to be toxic for them to live on or put a dwelling on. if there were stinging, vicious plants, if the trees were bent or they had cancers or big lumps on the side of the tree, like they had a cancer, or the trees would die in a particular area, they would know not to build a house there.
Stinging nettles. That's what it was. Stinging nettles. Yeah.
Right. And what's interesting is our son's property is 5 acres, and he has old growth trees. They're 500 and 600 years old. These trees, and they're cedars, so they're really slow growing. They're massive trees. And his driveway is a quarter of a mile long, and you go through this cathedral with these trees creating this incredible cathedral-like canopy. And it's the only place I've ever been able to clearly see where these energy lines start and stop. And if it's a toxic line, you see stinging nettles and trees that are oddly bent. But when that line stops and a positive line starts, you see ferns.
How fascinating.
It is an absolutely fascinating study because I've walked his property many times, and you can see it on our own, but not quite to the same degree, because his is truly, ours was logged at one point, and we have second and third growth trees, but he has old growth, which is kind of awe-inspiring, I would say, because there's an algorithm you can use based on the kind of tree. You take a measurement, you use the algorithm, it tells you the age of the tree. That's how we know how old they are without doing anything else. And the amount of wildlife in those trees is just inspiring, is the word I would use. But to be actually able to see where one ley line starts and stops. And people up here collect stinging nettles, and they use them like spinach. They just steam them and add butter and salt, because then they're not stinging or prickly. They use them as a health food. I haven't quite gotten there yet. And some people use fiddlehead ferns as food, and I tried that, and it was just not good. I should learn how to do foraging. I'm not there yet. The stuff tastes horrible. I mean, but a little butter and salt, anything tastes good. This was just bad.
Well, I guess if you learned how to tell mushrooms apart, you could tell which mushrooms are on the good parts and which mushrooms are not on the bad parts. So, there's certain mushrooms you don't want to be eating.
Because you don't use an angel mushroom, which is, you're alive only momentarily after you eat it. It's just that deadly. So, however, mushrooms represent the strength of a forest. So they're an interesting sign.
Well, all of that, all of the what's on the property, how the property feels, how the property looks, all of that gives clues as to whether or not a home is a happy home, I guess. And when I first met you and you said, my home is, very clear, and, it's got good energy, and I had no idea what you were talking about. But when I walked in, I knew it just felt like there wasn't any energy. But I didn't know the difference between good energy and bad energy. And after you taught me more about this and I started paying more attention, now I can recognize things much better. And I feel like I'm in a position where I can help more now. And, in the end, being able to help someone who wants to move or make their life better, or, just change where they are or change their environment. It's helpful if you can provide more than just filling out paperwork and, doing the basic things. For me, being able to help that person or help the house makes me feel a lot better at the end of a sale and be able to protect myself when I go to the house than just showing up and selling a piece of real estate. It's more about for me, it's more about helping someone move and have a happy experience, and hopefully the buyer has a happy experience and moves into a place that's comfortable. So, all of what I've learned from you with different ways to pay attention to things and the tools make a huge difference. And I'm so grateful for you that being in my life and having learned that.
Oh, well, thank you. I have greatly enjoyed the friendship, and knowing that you are using the tools and that you can share them if someone wants to know is really, really important, because you don't just sell a house, you're selling someone's home. You want them to have a positive experience. And if you knew that a serial killer had murdered his victims, you would probably steer your buyers away from that house. Just
That would be a disclosure for sure.
a major disclosure for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes when when builders go in and they just level things, you don't know what was there before. And that was the whole point of the movie Poltergeist. And that certainly happened in more than one place. So be that
Well,
as it may.
and it's funny because the builders might not, but the workers usually do.
Yeah, they do. It's funny, we're out here in the middle of nowhere on these 5 almost 6 acres we have. And everybody we have a lot of, deliveries and workmen who come, like everybody does, and they invariably say, "Oh, this is the best place. Oh, I love how this feels," or this house is so happy. And we had a carbon monoxide alarm go off, I don't know, about 9 months ago. And the fire department turned out. And of course, they go through every single room with their testers. You got to have your house. That never occurred to me that it was going to happen. Anyway, it was a false alarm. There were no carbon monoxide leaks. It was not a problem. And so I thought they were going to leave the house, but they said, we really love this house. Can you talk to us about this house? I'm thinking, really? They just stood there and asked question after question after question. And they didn't understand what they were feeling, but they felt really good when they were there. And so, and were not in any hurry to leave. Not that I wanted them to just quickly go, but I was observing their reaction. So when you have a location that you are raising the frequency of, which is a preposition at the end of a sentence, when you're improving your property, beautiful, healthy trees and plants, and a beautiful entryway, which is Feng Shui 101, you're creating a power spot. Whether you ever sell your home, eventually things change hands or you leave it to a family member, you're creating a place of such positive energy. It's actually visible in the ether. When people actually drive on that property, they don't know why they feel so much better. They just know that they do. That's a really cool thing. So,
and just a quick story about that. So that we have worked on our office. We're in a large we're with a large company, and everyone has an office area. And fortunately, we have a door and desks, and we can close off our office. And we worked on our office, and you found some ley lines, and anyway, it's all got worked out. Well, there are people who will come and sit in our office, and we cannot get them to leave.
yep.
Our title representative came, and he just wants to talk and sit there all day. We're like, excuse me, but we have some work to do. We'd love to talk to you all day, but it's time to go. And then there was one lady in our office. She walked up to the door and she would not step foot inside our office.
Wow.
She talked across 2 desks and, to try to talk to us because she didn't want to step in the office. And I just thought that was hysterical. I mean, that really brought home to me how, the difference between the energy. She couldn't handle it, I guess.
That's very, very telling. And when you have a situation where people don't want to leave, or they pass out and they fall asleep when they're in your space, which has happened to me many times, you have created a power spot, a very positive, energetic spot. Well, if someone has their frequency is very, very low, it's the resonance is so different. It's like these like ends of a magnet. They start repelling each other, and they can't walk in the office. I had a guy he was supposed to come and give a bid, and he couldn't walk in my front door. This was in San Diego. And I said, "Well, you're welcome to come in." He said, No. I'm just going to stand at the street. Maybe I just won't bid," and got in his car and drove away. Like, okay, I get it. If I hadn't gotten it, if I didn't understand, I might have taken it personally, but I understand it. It's all about frequency, and that seems to be coming up more and more and more now, is how frequency works. So anyway, well, do you have any more stories, or shall we call it a day?
Well, I have lots more stories, but I think we can call it a day. I just really appreciate everything you've done for me in the past. I mean, you mentioned we met each other in 2007. That's just amazing to me. So really, meeting you is one of the things that just positively impacted my life dramatically. I mean, totally changed my life, and I just so appreciate it.
Well, you're very, very welcome. I have greatly appreciated our friendship, and you're a really, really good person. And anyone who has you as an agent is exceedingly fortunate. So,
well, if anyone is interested in anything about real estate, they can call you to contact me. So
absolutely, I can connect you.
Yeah.
And if you want a great agent in the San Diego area, Jeanette's the person. And speaking of that, you can reach me at contact@GhostHelpers.com. All the books are available on Amazon, and the Ghost Helpers podcast is an app, and that is free on Amazon. And we have loved having everyone listen in and listen again. And this will be up on YouTube, and it will be on the Ghost Helpers app. And Jeanette, thank you with all my heart for sharing your wonderful stories today, and for being my friend for, 18 years?
Thank you. Same back at you.
Relationship. So, all right. Well, we're going to say goodbye to everyone, and we hope everyone who's listening gets something from this and believe what you feel, because it makes a big difference. Bye-bye.